for coming. So we talk about, Dharma here, right? We talk about in our lineage, we have koans, what we call koans, which like a parable, or a story of enlightenment that we learn from and process. And so this one, it's called Couldn't Explain for 5 Years. If it's your first time, it may sound a little esoteric or may not make a logical sense right off the bat, but that's okay. That's just part of it. That's part of it. But I'll try to help, help it make sense as much as I can. So a monk asked Joshu. Joshu is a famous teacher, famous for having profound sayings or teachings. A monk asked Joshu, "The supreme way is without difficulty. It just rejects discrimination. Isn't this a cliche for people these days?" So that's what the monk asked the teacher. Joshu said, "Once someone asked me, and I simply couldn't give an explanation for 5 years." And that's the koan, right? So that's it. And right, so on the face of it, it's kind of mysterious. It's not easy to see what's being asked here or answered here. And I don't know, it seems a little odd, right? So the student is referring to one of Joshu's older teachings, right? Joshu, and it actually comes up in the next koan in this book, the Blue Cliff Record. The Blue Cliff Record book, right? So this is koan 58, and koan 59 refers back to this teaching that Joshu gave, where earlier a monk asked, "The supreme way has no difficulty. It just rejects discrimination." So that's Joshu's teaching. And so it's become something that like people know this teaching, people know the saying, and they know the meaning of it. And so it's kind of taken for granted, I think. So I was trying to think of a modern day example of this, and you might say something like, "Let it go," right? Just let it go might be considered a cliche now, right? Once the Dharma reaches Disney, then it has become cliche. We're getting the teachings through Disney princesses. Nothing wrong with that. But anyway, it's like when it's something that everybody knows, everyone's heard, everyone talks about it, it's like, oh, it's expected. And it's considered right? It's considered like, this is a right way to see this. And so the monk is pointing that out to Joshu. He's saying, this teaching, right? You gave this teaching years ago, and now everybody accepts it, and it's just considered normal teaching. People quoting it probably regularly. And he's saying, isn't that a cliche? Which is actually rude. It's kind of rude to say, that teaching you gave, right? Isn't it just cliche now? Right? Isn't it just like become blah? Isn't it just like, hasn't it lost its impact? It's become a norm, or just something people say. Yeah, and it's, so anyway, it's kind of it's poking him. It's like, what's going on with that? Is the teaching still alive, right? Is this teaching still alive, or is it dead? Like once everyone accepts it and it's just a given and people just are quoting it regularly, then it's dead. The life is gone because people aren't striving for it. People aren't practicing for it. People aren't realizing it for themselves. We just go around quoting popular sayings that we've heard, and then it's dead. It's not alive for us, right? And Joshu responds, right? He does. So the way Joshu responds is I think, part of the main teaching here. He responds without being triggered, right? He responds without being defensive or saying, that's not cliche, or it's still alive, or it still means this, or people don't get this, people don't see the real meaning of it. He just responds and he says, yeah, somebody asked me that before, and I was never able to explain it. And so that's right, the commentary and the koan, right? There's commentary, and they love this. They're like, oh my God, it's the best answer ever. It's amazing. And so there's value in seeing that, value in seeing the power of that answer without being triggered, without being defensive and reactive, just saying, it's unexplainable. I cannot answer that. If I answer it for you, then it is cliche. If I give you the answer, then it's dead. And so it's really a call to practice with it. It's a call to realize this for yourself. How have you experienced the supreme way that knows no difficulty, that has no preferences? How are you experiencing and realizing no preferences in your life? Right? Is that alive for you? Are you realizing this for yourself rather than just watching people quoting it? And so, yeah, this is a real call to action. It's it's putting the burden on you. And I'm asking this of you too, right? For you, your practice, all of you here today and on Zoom. How are you realizing no preferences in your life? Right? It's not going to happen waiting for it, right? It's a combination. Sitting is not waiting, right? We can sit to wait. We can choose to just sit. Oh, it's like, okay, I'm putting in my time. I got my hour in. All right, I'm done for the week. Or, oh, this is so relaxing. Finally, I get a place to just chill and relieve stress. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with relieving stress, but don't confuse that with waking up and manifesting your realization. Right? It takes action. We can sit with action, right? There's no formula. It doesn't have to look like anything. You don't have to go out and help people. You don't have to have a service position. These things do help, right? They do. They really do. And so there's a lot of encouragement to do these things. You can sit and make this progress and manifest your realization through sitting, but it's a very active practice. It's not relaxing. It's sitting with intention. It's sitting with, the intention of no intention, right? Which takes a lot of effort and energy, right? You should be tired by the end of it, end of your sitting period. Getting tired that way actually gives us more energy, right? In the end. But there's exertion. We exert ourselves in this practice, whether it's silent and still or active and outside. So I have a cliche that I like to share with people. I shared it with Show You this morning. And I share it with people regularly, right? Maybe not every week, but probably at least every once a month, I'll say this. So, sorry. Someone will come to me and they'll have something, they'll say, oh, I'm struggling with this, or, you know, this is a problem, or this is terrible, or this, I'm feeling this way. And I'll say, there's nothing wrong with that. Right? So think of a problem you have, right? Anybody tell me, I would like to literally hear somebody share just something real quick, just like a problem or something you struggle with. Work, and what about it? Oh, okay. Nothing wrong with that. Right? And so you can see this applies to everything. Right? There's nothing you can come at me with that I cannot respond. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Thank you, Angie. Angie's sharing that has struggled or struggles with anxiety and depression. There's nothing wrong with that. Right? In our culture of fixing, we have a culture of fixing, and we want to fix everything. And we're conditioned to fix everything through buying, consuming, buying things. Or medicine, right? To be prescribed medicine for our struggles. Choa also asks, what if I have a hatred towards a race or religion, right? Bigotry and racism. There's nothing wrong with that. Right? Ironically, realizing there's nothing wrong with it is the fastest way to fix what is wrong with it, or to address what is wrong with it, right? I don't want to get into the philosophy too much, right? But there's like an absolute teaching, right? Absolute and relative, right? So an absolute response is there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfect as it is. You are perfect as you are, with your hatred, with your judgment, with your fear, with your anxiety and your depression, right? You're still perfect as you are. And then sometimes, right, it's important to have a relative sensitivity and say, no, this is not appropriate, right? It's not right. It's wrong to be acting that way here. And you can do something about it, right? And that's, that can be cliche too, right? To say, oh, you need to do something to fix that. You need to change, or you're bad and you're wrong. So what I'm emphasizing here today for you all is this practice of perfection, right? Realizing that there's nothing wrong as it is, nothing wrong with me as I am, nothing wrong with my beliefs and my feelings, my actions. from this perspective. And explaining that isn't necessarily going to help, right? I can tell you, I can try to explain to you how you're perfect as you are, but it's not going to make a difference until you realize this for yourself, right? So that's the call here, is for you to realize this for yourself, that you are perfect as you are, and that whatever you're struggling with, there's nothing wrong with that struggle. And that's what makes it alive, right? That's what gives life. That's what breathes life into this practice and this tradition, is you realizing this for yourself. So we practice to realize this. We practice to realize our perfection. We practice hard. We strive to realize that there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with our struggle. And then we practice to manifest that, right? We realize, we have realization, and then we practice to manifest realization. We practice because we are realized. Okay, so again, Angie asks in the chat, we're having a real-time chat in response session. That's great. How do we deal with the discomfort of what feels wrong, right? By realizing that there's nothing wrong with that. Right? So we remind each other. Part of this practice, that's why we're all here, is to remind each other how we practice and what we can do, and that we are practicing together. And so I want you to take this seriously, right? This is as a teaching. There's nothing wrong with that. Right? It's my cliche for the day. When you're struggling and you feel like, oh my God, I'm feeling so much anxiety, which I feel, right? As you know, I've shared with all of you all my anxiety over the years, especially last year. I went through a lot of it, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. So when you're feeling that, when you're feeling, oh my God, I'm in fear, I'm anxious, realize, just if you can recall this voice, right? Intend this voice to show up. And there's nothing wrong with this. It's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to be uncomfortable. There's nothing wrong with feeling the pain of growing, the growing pains or the pain of trauma. We feel this way. There's nothing wrong with this, right? And so that's one of the reasons we practice. We develop concentration, and through sitting, we sit a lot and we develop concentration. And that concentration is our foundation for being able to recall these teachings. It's like, oh, I can remember the teaching more easily now because I've developed more concentration. At least that's how it's worked for me, right? When I first started sitting, I couldn't recall a teaching. I'd be frustrated, and I still do get frustrated, and I'm like, I just act out and I react. But it is easier for me to remember, okay, taking a breath, I'm present. Okay, now I remember there's nothing wrong with this, right? It's okay to feel this way. This remembrance comes through practice, and we develop our ability to remember our true self. Right, and so that's a plug for practice, right? Like I said, it doesn't come through waiting. It doesn't come through just sitting and chilling out. It comes through sitting and rewiring our brains and our bodies and our nervous system to be present with our self, be present with our breath. Takes effort and action. It's hard work. It takes talking with a teacher. It takes sharing with the Sangha, right? We sit quietly, we talk with a teacher, and we talk with each other, right? These are the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha treasures that we want to continually call upon. We want to engage in the three treasures, right? We can't forget any of those, or it'll fall short. The potential of our realization will fall short. All right. So, there's nothing wrong with being cliche. There's nothing wrong with making the practicing with this until it becomes cliche, until it's second nature to be like, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with my anxiety. There's nothing wrong with my anger. There's nothing wrong with my judgment, being judgmental. Now what? Now that I've realized the perfection, or that there's nothing wrong with it, now what? Well, now I have more freedom to take action if I choose, right? It's easier for me to do something about it if I give myself permission to do it. If I give myself permission to feel anxiety, then I have a little more freedom to actually maybe do some exercise, or maybe talk with a friend, or maybe go to the doctor, or maybe send love, right? That was my main go-to practice back in the day. It was like 2 years ago. I talked about love for 6 months. And it really helped, right? I would have struggled more doing that if I was continually beating myself up about it and saying, this is wrong, I shouldn't feel this way. It's like, oh no, it's okay. I can accept it. I accept that I feel anxiety. I accept that I'm judgmental. Okay, so now what can I do? Now I have more energy to shift it if it needs to be shifted, or if I choose to do that. Okay. A monk asked Joshu, the supreme way is without difficulty. It just rejects discrimination. Isn't this a cliche for people these days? Joshu said, once someone asked me and I simply couldn't give an explanation. It says for 5 years. I couldn't give an explanation for 5 years. I have no idea what 5 years means, right? Right. The essence is I can't explain to you your perfection. I cannot explain you into perfection. You have to realize this for yourself. I cannot explain to you why you should see that there's nothing wrong with how you're feeling and what you're going through. But I can support your practice so that you can realize this for yourself.